The Fall of the House of Usher is the 5th TV series that Mike Flanagan has created for Netflix. Having tackled Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, Henry James's The Turn of the Screw with The Haunting of Bly Manor, and Christopher Pike's The Midnight Club, Mike Flanagan has now set out to adapt Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher and other short stories in this new series. The reason I skipped over Midnight Mass right there was because it is not an adaptation of anything, although it is clearly inspired by Stephen King, whose work Mike Flanagan is intricately familiar with. It should be noted that I haven't seen or read The Midnight Club, but having read The Haunting of Hill House and The Turn of the Screw, and having seen the corresponding shows, I can safely say that these adaptations aren't really adapting the original material as much as they are creative reimaginings of those stories. On this front, your mileage is going to vary. The Shirley Jackson original is kinda cerebral and boring, whereas the Flanagan adaptation is incredible. On the other hand, James's The Turn of the Screw is a captivating piece of literary fiction, while The Haunting of Bly Manor struggles to stay interesting throughout its run, barely carrying over anything from the novel. I've only read a few short stories by Poe, so I can't comment on the adaptation side of this series specifically, but the influences are fairly easy to spot even having not read Poe. The Fall of the House of Usher, The Black Cat, Telltale Heart, and Berenice being the fairly obvious ones in the show. The one consistent element in Flanagan's fiction, not just his adaptations, is the heart that he imbues into his stories. Family is incredibly important to Flanagan. Most characters are kind individuals trapped in bad situations, and even the central evil often has a backstory that explains why they are the way that they are. There's always a happy, if not bittersweet ending, as the central evil is dismantled and the characters can begin anew. Now, it should be noted that this isn't the case for every single Flanagan film, for example Oculus, but this is the story structure that he often relies on. This gooey, heartfelt center of Mike Flanagan's writing has been my central issue with the writer-director throughout his career. As much as I hate to admit it, I am a cynical millennial, and these endings often serve to lessen my enjoyment of the narratives. The world is a cold and harsh place, and the horror genre is a reflection of it. That is to say that although I don't enjoy Mike Flanagan's positive outlook, in this genre at least, I can appreciate his style of direction and writing. There's no denying that he is one of the best horror directors out there currently. One thing that has always separated Flanagan from his peers, maybe excluding Guillermo del Toro, is his style of killing off characters that we care a lot about. Without getting into spoilers, a death of a character in Flanagan's writing is often delivered as a tragedy that tugs at the heartstrings. A character dying in a Flanagan story isn't horrific, it's sad. The Fall of the House of Usher is very different in this regard. Okay, so the actual name of the show is way too long to say this often, so from now on I'll just call the series Usher. Usher differs greatly from Flanagan's other shows. The tone is noticeably more mature. The show has consistent gore, nudity, and substance abuse, unlike the previous adaptations. This is, without a doubt, the first Flanagan production to feature a character using a toy to powder some cough medicine, let's say. It's like they decided to HBO up the shows that Flanagan has been making, and honestly, I'm completely on board. Usher, unlike the other Flanagan shows, has an edge to it. There's some really disturbing imagery here. I won't spoil these events in this beginning section, but I was genuinely surprised how gross the show was willing to get. What's even better is Mike Flanagan finally having the courage to write truly despicable characters. The Ushers, who are the center of the show, are terrible people. The show is brimming with truly despicable nepo babies who are just so goddamn annoying that the show becomes all the more fascinating to watch. The comparison to Succession is an obvious one, but it should be also clarified that these characters aren't nearly as fleshed out as the Roy family. But that's by design. It's an 8-episode run, which doesn't waste any time. This is getting a bit difficult to talk about without a spoiler warning, so in summation, I think Usher is a fascinating show and I would recommend it. It's much better than Midnight Mass or The Haunting of Bly Manor, but doesn't quite reach the heights of The Haunting of Hill House, which is still the gold standard for horror television for me. With that, I'll issue a spoiler warning for the entire show. Let's get into it. The narrative begins with Roderick Usher, the head of the Usher family and the center of the show, inviting his nemesis 𝔉𝔞𝔩𝔲 to his decrepit childhood home. There he intends to come clean about his various crimes as the CEO of a large pharmaceutical company. This fireside chat between Roderick Usher and 𝔘𝔞𝔩 becomes the frame narrative. As Roderick begins to explain his life story, he does so with the knowledge that every single one of his children has died as of late. I was a bit mixed on these scenes between Roderick Usher and 𝔘𝔞𝔩. The show resorts to doing the same scene again and again, even to the point that the show itself has to comment on it.
And here's where I stop in my tracks, slowly return to the chair, sit down, and start the recorder again.
I mean, it'd be nice.
A few moments later.
Stupid lives without 1 minute.
It gets old, and lamp shading doesn't necessarily fix it. There's also the added annoyance of Roderick speaking in riddles and 𝔘𝔞𝔩 never getting a straightforward answer from him. I get it, it's a mystery, Roderick can't come out and state the events plainly, the show would be 1 episode long if that happened, but I'm just so tired of the Lost-style mystery writing in which the mystery master speaks in riddles and purposefully abstracts events to drag out a prolonged narrative.
Lamppost Station.
I've already said more than I should have.
There's that cynicism again, by the way. I'll cop to this being a somewhat necessary way to tell the story, but then again, I can't help but to feel frustrated when 𝔘𝔞𝔩 doesn't react like a human to Roderick speaking in riddles and refusing to elaborate.
OMG, #lemon.
Each episode focuses on a single death in the family, weaving a tapestry of the Usher children as well as the history of their father and aunt. The show chooses to reveal to the audience that all the Usher children are dead from the very beginning. This is a very bold choice. It's not about if the children are going to die, it's about how and when they will die. The show also doesn't pull any tricks in this regard. Okay, maybe Lenore is a trick, but mostly no tricks. The children shown in the beginning are actually dead. The show always follows one of the children through the episode as they inevitably end up dead by the end of it. The pacing is predictable, but I didn't have a problem with it like I had with, for example, The Last of Us. This pacing works because we already know that the children are going to die, and because the more interesting element in the show becomes the central mystery of who or what Verna is and what did Roderick do to cause this sort of fate to all his children. The pacing of the show reminded me a lot of the game What Remains of Edith Finch, although I must also admit that Usher never reaches the emotional heights of that narrative. As I mentioned in the intro, Usher is a far more adult show than the previous Flanagan adaptations. As with previous Flanagan projects, family is once again one of the more important aspects of this show, although this time there's a perverse twist on those family values. Roderick Usher is a very different father from Hugh Crane or Henry Wingrave. All of these fathers are absent from their children's lives, but Roderick isn't so because of a traumatic event in his past. In fact, Roderick's trauma passed down from his own absent father makes him a better father, one that doesn't deny his heritage no matter what, at least in theory. What then complicates Roderick's relationship to his children is the corrupting influence of money. This is central to the show's theme, but it is too early to discuss it, so let's focus on the Nepo babies for now. The children of Roderick are all garbage people. They're almost comically villainous and out of touch with human emotions.
The elevator, we can talk about it in a minute.
Oh, you're in the elevator. Okay, see you in a sec. You gotta go.
You promised me.
They treat their employees and significant others like garbage. They even treat their siblings like lesser beings based on the order of birth. And that's not even taking into account the numerous shady or immoral business dealings that they have. The meat of the show is the Usher children going about their business ventures, all the while Verna takes them out one by one. I already mentioned that the character deaths in most Flanagan stories are tragic and sad. Take for example the story of the lady in the lake in The Haunting of Bly Manor, which the show devotes an entire episode to illustrating. The deaths in Usher are not tragic or sad. They're horrifying but also poetic. The way Verna goes about killing the Ushers is always tied in with their inherent flaws. The first death in the show, Perry in episode 2, ties right into his hubris. He wanted to have a mass, and went about it in the most immoral way possible. He invites his brother's wife, he tries to cuddle 𝔉𝔞𝔩𝔮, and in his hubris, he orders the sprinklers to be connected to the tanks on the roof without actually checking the contents. The tanks, of course, contain a highly corrosive fluid, which ends up killing everyone at the party. I have to admit, I was a bit iffy on the show up until this very specific moment. The sprinklers turning on and reducing everyone into a giant puddle of skin and flesh, all the while a remix of Closer is playing in the background, instantly grabbed my attention and told me that this wasn't going to be like Bly Manor or Midnight Mass. It told me that this was going to be much more in line with the type of horror that I enjoy. Unfortunately, this is also the most gruesome death that the show has to offer. There's nothing that tops Perry's death in the show, and it's in the second episode. That isn't to say that there aren't interesting kills in the show beyond this point. Napoleon's death with the black cat is entertaining, Camille's death is really spooky and serves as a venue for 𝔉𝔤𝔲𝔰� to flex her acting muscles.
Chimps are becoming woke? Is that what's happening?
Victorine's death is a tad anticlimactic in my opinion, and kinda predictable to be honest, but the visual of her dead girlfriend was very disturbing. The deaths of Tamerlane and Frederick were the most tame, and I really don't understand why they were saved for last. There really should have been one more very upsetting kill at the end. And no, Madeline's death doesn't do it for me. There's one element of Usher that I would like to discuss. The show comes off a bit preachy at times. The show is about corporate greed, big pharma, nepo babies, animal rights, etc, etc. Now, before anyone throws the woke media buzzword around, I have to preface that I don't find bringing these things up or having a diverse cast as a problem. My problem is solely tied to how these issues are brought forward in the show. There are so many monologues in the show that feel so forced that it was honestly a bit difficult to take the show seriously. Roderick's lemon speech comes to mind primarily.
So you get Apple to call the new operating system OS Lemon. Little accent, OAO, you charge 40% more for organic lemons, 50% more for conflict-free lemons. You pack the capital of lemon lobbies, you get a Kardashian to suck a lemon wedge and leak sex tape. Timothy Chalamet wears lemon shoes at Cannes. The hashtag campaign, something isn't cool or tight or awesome, no, it's lemon. Did you see that movie? Did you go to that concert? It was effing lemon. Billie Eilish, OMG, hashtag lemon.
I got the feeling that Roderick name-dropping Billie Eilish or talking about breast-shaped lemons to sell more of them was supposed to be this profound statement on the lengths that rich people will go to become even richer. About how rich people have all the tools at their hand to control the narrative, which we hoi polloi will never completely understand. Instead, this tangent really comes off as kinda weird and kinda dumb. I mean, it does reinforce that Roderick is a rich douchebag, and it totally fits in with his character, but I found this monologue kinda ham-fisted. 𝔉𝔞𝔩𝔮 also has many monologues. These weren't as a big of an issue as they tied in with the kills that also reflected the hubris of the Usher children, although it is also kinda weird that Camille gets the speech about animal rights, even though she wasn't the one killing the monkeys. Right? It was the speech in the final episode that I kinda got the sense that the show could have done this better by showing and not telling. Show us the people affected by ligadone, don't just refer to them. The pyramid of corpses is a very cool visual, but then again, if we're commenting on real things in the real world, like addiction is, maybe we should actually see the real people affected by that. In the end, I don't mind that the show is teaching me about these issues. If 𝔉𝔞𝔩𝔮's cat monologue was accurate to real life, then now I know more about my pets, and that's cool. All I'm saying is that some of these elements could have been told in a less forced way. The show reveals from the beginning that all the Usher children have died. The central mystery of the show then becomes about how these deaths occurred, who 𝔉𝔞𝔩𝔮 is, and what Roderick and Madeleine are hiding from on the New Year's Eve of 1979. Having watched the show twice now, I have to give props to how well the mystery is told in the first 4 episodes. We get these motifs that really don't mean anything to the viewer, but they're all compelling in some way. The brick wall with a bell chiming, the jester in the car, the crow, etc, etc. By the end, I was dying to find out how it all tied in together, and I was not disappointed. The show really doesn't try to hide Roderick and Madeleine's crime, but still it came as a surprise for me. The revelation of the deal between the Ushers and 𝔉𝔞𝔮 was predictable, but I didn't get the impression that this was supposed to be this grand revelation anyway. We know that some sort of Faustian bargain has been struck, we just don't fully understand the terms of it. It's Dorian Gray and Final Destination mixed together. What I found very refreshing was that the deal had not been struck for a soul. It's a small detail, but the bargaining of his lineage just felt far more thematically resonant. Roderick already had 2 kids and he still took the deal. Not only that, he proceeded to have even more kids after. This just ties into how much of a douchebag Roderick actually is. Verna didn't end up becoming a demon that drags Roderick to hell, as is often the case with narratives like this. She's more like a force of nature, embodying the surrounding environments to her will. She's consequence. The only usher that Verna kills directly is Lenore, and that's also the only time that the narrative feels like one of the other Flanagan adaptations. In the end, I know that some people will consider this a downgrade from the more eerie, subtle horror depicted in The Haunting of Hill House, Bly Manor, and Midnight Mass, and I totally understand that point of view as well. Although I haven't been a fan of most of these series, I recognize how popular these shows have been. The Fall of the House of Usher has proven to me that Mike Flanagan isn't just a one-trick pony. We already knew that he was able to write about good people in bad circumstances, but this is the first narrative that is really about bad people and getting what's coming to them. Out of all of his repertoire, movies included, this is the one that stands out to me as the most unique. It's not the best, but it is the departure that I needed. Thanks for watching.